Good morning, everyone. So, a Times article today looks at GlaxoSmithKline's remarkable profitability, and lots of this is to do with their existing drugs. We've got lots of new drugs that are out there that are still in license, and actually they've got this unique selling point to do with certain health conditions. So these instantly made me think of the product life cycle, the Boston matrix, and how some products that might be classed as, for instance, your cash cows, big market share, not spending a lot of money on advertising, lots of loyal people that regularly use these medications. And also in this article, it also talks about a declining part of the business, with the HIV treatment part of the business looking like it's going to be in decline. We could have also done pestle analysis with this as well. There's lots of external threats here. We could have done SWOT. For example, GlaxoSmithKline will probably be constantly being sued from people that might get ill from their medication. So there's lots going on with these types of articles. You should keep an eye out for it. So I'm going to focus this a bit on Boston Matrix and the product life cycle. There are some exam questions in this, but I've not given them a walkthrough. I've just written a couple of example exam questions that you could consider planning or doing if you really wanted to. So this is part of the article, and I've reworked this a little bit so we could get it into a condensed case study. And before we go into the case study itself, we can look at this lovely extract that accompanied it as well. So the title of it is quite good as well as part of the case study. So upbeat outlook. Upbeat is clearly things getting better. And we've got data from 2022 to January 2024. However, in the future, 12 mark, 20 mark, maybe we could think about data forecasting, sales forecasting in context with what we find in the case study. So this is a lovely piece of data. There's lots we can do with it. We can do a change. We can smooth the data out, maybe do an average between 2 points. We could look at, not so long ago, this low here compared to the high here. So there's lots of things we can do with this, and it might be that 1 point is looking at this data to this data, and we can see that overall it's gone down a bit. Clearly a bit is not enough. We would do a percentage change or at least a subtraction. And another argument could be, actually, since October, I would love to know what happened here to bring it down to here. So if this happens again in the future, then maybe we could. So there's lots we could do with this data. If you are just saying this data is bigger than this data or smaller than this data, you're not going to get good marks. Percentage change, subtraction, comparing and contrasting, and then discussing the numbers, you're going to do well. So we can see boosts to profits, boost forecasts, blockbuster success of their new vaccine. This is lovely. New, I'm thinking introduction and growth stage of the product life cycle. I'm thinking this blockbuster success is rapid growth of sales, possibly rapid growth of market share. This sounds like a rising star. Now, we know with rising stars, from what we've learned with Boston Matrix, is normally with rising stars, there's lots of advertising. We need to promote, we need to persuade customers that might be using our competitors' medication to stop using it and come and try ours. And hopefully they will be the customers that fuel that cash cow status a little bit later when we're not advertising as much. So we think about the different strategies that we might be using in the different stages of the product life cycle, or in the different classifications that we see in those 4 quadrants in the Boston Matrix. We're not just going to get marks for, oh, by the way, this is a cash cow. Well, great, but so what? We need to think about why it's important and how it informs strategy, possibly bringing in a bit of Porter's 5 Forces, competitive rivalry and stuff like that. This video is really focused on my lower 6th students, so they can read ahead to Porter's and Ansoff and models like that if they want to. Okay, so if we look through here, they're the second largest pharmaceutical company, and they've raised their long-term forecasts. What a lovely word. They are so confident that in the future this might happen. Well, in the future, if this happens, maybe we can question some of their forecasts. Okay, so we've got some nice things in there. We've got shingles vaccine. We're not talking about products, are we? We're going to talk about shingles vaccine. I won't try and pronounce it. And we can see that they've hit a record sale. This is not a forecast. Okay, so 5% increase overall. And they're saying in this article, actually, this is a lot to do with that. But a notable 14% when you exclude the COVID products. So what you've done there is you've actually raised awareness of the importance of this vaccine to their overall success of their product portfolio. Okay, we've got some numbers in there, and we can see that their profitability is increasing as well to a healthy £8.77 billion. Okay, company now expects forecasts. Beautiful. Reliability, validity of data. Whenever we get a data question, and there's loads of data here, we're thinking about how reliable is the data and is it valid? Well, I think this is valid. You know, it's to do with their sales, it's to do with their new and older medicines when we get through it. But actually, how reliable is this? Well, expects, forecasts, maybe is questionable data. We're not going to say we don't believe it. We look for factors that could influence the reliability of this data in the future. However, this is a forecast. We've got something here. Did they forecast that big drop? I'm not quite sure. Okay, so 7% over sales growth and 11% profit. Okay, to 2026. So we're in 2024 at the moment, and so that's another 2 years. Okay, is this by the end of 2024 or the beginning of 2024? Not quite sure. So this could be nearly 3 years because it's February the 1st at the moment. Adjusting for there, even further in the future, the further your forecasts are in the future, then actually the more things that might happen and the less reliable those forecasts are. I'd be more confident with that sort of forecast than I would with 2031, sorry. Despite concerns over the impact of competition, generic competition is other drugs that sort of do the same thing and maybe they're cheaper. And we've got HIV business here. They think there's going to be a bit of a problem from 2028. It might be that some of their HIV drugs that they've developed back in the day are coming out of license. Now in the UK with medicines are protected, that copyright type of thing and patents, they're protected for 20 years. Okay, after that, it comes out of license and anyone can sort of make it. Okay, that's why paracetamol, for example, are so inexpensive. If you've got the Tesco's one for 39p for 16 tablets next to the Nurofen one, well, the Nurofen one's pretty much exactly the same, except for the amount of money they spend on advertising and persuading you that it's better for you. As long as you believe it, pay the extra money. If you want to look at the ingredients, you will see they are pretty much identical. Buy the Tesco's one. So good dividend payments, shareholders will be very happy. And also we can see that that was very popular. So yeah, we're fine. The shareholders are happy here. They're a PLC company, depending on the question, depends how much we're going to talk about that. Other stuff we could talk about here, and this is really good for product lifecycle. 15 years of research, okay, and that's really important when you think about the product lifecycle. Their R&D stage that on our poster in class looks quite small. Well, in some sectors, 15 years. What happens if one of your competitors comes to the marketplace before you? with something that you've spent 15 years on. You're playing catch up. You haven't got that first mover advantage. Remember, we initially talked at the beginning of the lower sixth about Viagra and how they sort of created a brand new market. They still have that iconic blue pill, that iconic brand, and none of us could name the second place pill. Interesting. Not always prizes for second place. Okay, so we've got some really good data there. Moving on, here's our poster from class again, and here's a question, just to practice planning really. So using your knowledge of the Boston Matrix, which means I need to use the language, the terms, we would be looking for opportunities to identify market growth and market share. Okay, we can talk about this. We're not just going to talk about stars and question marks. Assess the likely impact. Well, that's clearly first part of the hook, and we've got the on there, so that's quite nice, on their overall financial performance. Okay, so we know the overall impact on that, and we are going to be talking about financial performance, and it could be that TikTok style of sales and profits, but you must contextualize. Of having, you can pronounce that, emerge as a rising star product. So we've got the language of Boston Matrix in the question, and we might want to describe what rising star is. Well, it's quite easy really, isn't it? Because we've got it on our poster, and we will look for examples of that to contextualize it. Okay, we are spending a lot of money on advertising to continue with this rapid growth of customer acquisition. Okay, now that might be advertising directly to people who might have shingles, for example, or more likely it's advertising to doctors' surgeries and medical companies and insurance companies and stuff like that. So we're not going to explore the question. We're going to have a quick look at Boston Matrix. So the first thing I'll be looking for is my rising star. It's mentioned here. How is it a star? I want to know. Well, we've got high market share growth. Yeah, and we can see this with some of the numbers. Okay, it's backed up. We understand from our theory, which I've already highlighted over here, that stars require investment to maintain their market position. We would look for that evidence in the case study, and we can see we've got some examples of more growth. Okay, there's no evidence in the case study or the original article that talks about how much money they're spending on it, so we could just bring that in. It's very important that this rising star continues to grow. It might be the cash cow of the future, but the bigger the market share, the bigger the cash cow profits in the future. So on Boston Matrix still, we're then thinking about, well, is there anything else in this article that we might class as a we might categorize in a different quadrant? Well, we've got our potential question marks, or maybe they're cash cows. So maybe our cash cows, the HIV in the future, might be reducing because of what's going on in the marketplace. Maybe it's the litigation, maybe it's the generic competition, maybe it's lots of other things as well. And that 2028 forecast on their part is not actually that far away. Okay, the article talks about generic competition, which means I'm feeling that some stuff's going out of license and other people will just make it, like my example with paracetamol. Okay, so it could be that the question mark is, do we revitalize this brand? Do we spend money on it to get it back to growing towards through star to cash cow again? Or do we try and invent something else that's better, future stars, 15 years worth of R&D? Or do we just acknowledge that it's sort of there and the market share will just dwindle off, and as long as we've got something else to replace it, overall GSK still make loads of money? And that might be the future dogs in the future. Okay, not sure if this is a dog. Oh, there we go. Not sure because, you know, maybe when the current drugs are out of license, haven't got that information. It really depends on, do they Does it go to low market share and low market growth? And do they bother investing in it? Or is it just part of their portfolio when the GSK rep goes into a big hospital or something and they'll see how it goes? Eventually, maybe they just stop selling it. So looking at the product life cycle, this is a really, thank you to whoever they are, but this is a really useful product life cycle. This is totally different than the poster we have on the wall in the classroom. And this illustrates that 15 years worth of R&D. This isn't to do with GSK, this is just generally stuff from this website. And we've got 20 years here for an example. And I'm thinking that it takes 10 years to get them here, and 20 years is probably when it starts coming out of license. Okay, so we can see that classic return on investment phase where you've got the rapid growth here, and then your sales peak, introduction stage, growth, maturity, cash cow, slow growth, making some money, comes out of license, and it just goes straight down. And it's got the word generics in there, which ties in lovely to obviously the article that I've adapted for you. But it's quite interesting here, preclinical, phase 1, phase 2. I'm the wrong type of doctor for this type of thing, but we can see you then go through registration, but registration in every single country probably that you're going to sell this stuff in. And look at the costs. You know, so obviously this is the cost cycle, but what we've got here is, you know, maybe relatively low costs, but the more it goes through all the different levels of testing and legislation, you imagine if it didn't get to market there. Wow, how much money have they spent? You imagine if your competitors launched here when you're still ramping up costs here. I bet you there's lots of drugs that get to this stage, competitors beat them to the marketplace, and they literally shelve it. Okay, that's why pharmaceutical companies need to get that money recouped in the early stages here before you run out of license and the generic stuff comes out. Okay, really good illustration, really like that. The question I put together for this is, so using your knowledge of the product life cycle, assess the potential effects of GSK's innovation strategy. So we've got assess the potential effects, potential impacts type thing. This is clearly part 1 of our hook. I've put on in there to be nice. On their innovation strategy, well, innovation is bringing out new products in context with the anticipated challenges to its HIV business entering the decline stage. Okay, so this is going into the decline stage. And that's the language for the product life cycle, same sort of format as the previous one. And we can see the anticipated challenges. This question sort of writes itself. You would go in and find evidence to back up this. So looking for introduction and growth stages here. First of all, we've got that 15 years that I've mentioned. The vaccine achieves significant sales, we can see, possibly mirroring this type of product life cycle here. And we've got some lovely context there. Ongoing US patent lawsuit. Well, clearly another medical company, pharma company, is suing them for copying their drugs. And we can see the number 1 company is probably doing that. Okay, some of these things are so close to the first one that comes to market that actually, if it's too close, then you're breaking copyright and patent legislation. But it's only in the US. Maybe they can get away with it. Maybe they didn't do it. Let's presume innocence before we think they're guilty. Okay, so we've got that dynamic competitiveness in the growth stage. So here, 2 companies might come out with a brand new Alzheimer's drug, for example, because there's such a huge demand in that marketplace for obvious reasons, because we're all living longer. Maturity stage, well, you know, we've got decline stage up here, but with maturity stage of some of them, all these companies will be looking for a mix of these. If you've got some in R&D, some at cash cow paying for the R&D, some in that growth stage, rising star, where you're throwing money at advertising as well to have that, to overcome that competitive dynamics, you want a bit of a mixture. Or you're borrowing money for your R&D, for example. So the overall aim is, as one goes into decline stage and suddenly you're not making as much money, you should be thinking, well, what about the rest? Okay, so we're then looking for possible decline. Well, we've got HIV business in the question, which is why you've got it listed down here. We've got the concerns again over generic competition, and we could talk. We're then describing really the axes on the diagram in the product life cycle: reduced sales growth, market saturation linked into the generics. And if it's market saturation suddenly in a mass market, where's the differentiation? Well, maybe you've got that brand identity of being the first mover, like the Viagra example, and maybe that continues. But if the competitors are so much cheaper than you, if I was an insurance company, I would be telling my doctors to use the generic to save money. Me personally, as an individual consumer, I'm not the customer of GSK, even though they will market to me directly. What they need to persuade is the doctors and the medical institutions to continue buying their stuff. Okay, hopefully that was useful. Please feel free to take a screenshot or use Google image search or something to find the original one. I've referenced it down the bottom because I've not adapted it in any way, and you can read the full Times article if you want to. Thank you very much.